The U.S. Navy announced it would be extending the deployment of one of its naval strike groups. Now, this follows a drone attack that killed an American contractor and injured several American troops. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the decision to extend the deployment of the George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group means that 5,000 American forces won't be returning home anytime soon.
Yeah, that's not what this administration wants to do. I know they want to pride themselves on making friends around the globe, apologizing around the globe, but certainly not getting into heated conflicts or escalating any situations around the globe. And if you recall, last week when we saw these back-to-back proxy attacks by Iran's regime on U.S. assets in the region, President Biden went to the podium and said, "We do not want to escalate things, but there will be consequences." So kind of going back and forth and speaking a bit in contradictory terms, especially if you're Iran's regime, you're not really shaking in your boots when you hear that the United States does not want to have a conflict, does not want to escalate, does not want to be involved, especially when this administration is all about that as their branding. So, of course, all our enemies are going to take advantage of that. And we see more and more of these types of proxy attacks. There have been 83 plus attacks on U.S. assets since Biden has been in office, and over 30 just since October. So, yes, they got the message that this administration is not serious about it, but perhaps this is a small step in the right direction to say that, look, we're here, we have to have a presence here because you're not letting us leave. If you want the region, you got to behave, and then we'll leave. So that's what we're seeing over in Syria.
Lisa, Air Force combat aircraft downed an unidentified aircraft that appeared to have crossed into Israeli airspace from Syria on Sunday. The incident came amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran related to Iran's presence on Israel's northern border.
Yeah, of course, this is another proxy. It's really Iran's regime operating out of Syria, using that as their launch pad to regional affairs, to have access to the big Satan, which is the United States and our assets there, and the little Satan, which is Israel. These are the two sworn enemies of Iran's regime. And of course, being in Syria and having a presence all throughout the Middle East, Iran's regime has access to its two enemies and is able to really take little steps to test the waters. And in this case, a drone going into Israel, definitely testing the waters to see how far they can get, what they can get away with, how quickly Israeli intelligence, in this case, very quickly, would be able to capture them and to notice them. And again, testing us all around the world. It's interesting how far Iran's regime has been able to carry out this desire to spread its influence. They were the original Islamic State. When we talk about ISIS being the Islamic State, that's a Sunni version of Islam. The original Islamic State came into power 44 years ago with the toppling of the Shah in Iran. And this regime that came into power wanted to spread its brand of political Islam all throughout the world. And they're doing a pretty good job of it, Hal. Look, they are in Syria, they're in Iraq, they're in Lebanon, they're in Yemen, they're in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, they're at our southern border. They are in Venezuela and Bolivia and Brazil and all throughout Latin America. So when the Biden administration speaks about this, of getting back into the nuclear deal, of shaking hands with these people, they have a very different agenda than shaking hands and signing nuclear deals. They definitely want to spread their influence, and they want to let us know here in the United States, they want to let us know that they're at our footstep, that they have access to us, whether it's in Syria or Venezuela or anywhere else, that they can reach us if they want to.
A U.S. citizen who moved his family to Syria to join the Islamic State terrorist group has been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. 55-year-old Emran Ali, who was born in Trinidad and Tobago, pleaded guilty last November, Lisa, to conspiring to provide material support to a foreign terrorist group.
Yes, he moved his family from country to country until they ended up in Syria. He had lied to his family and his friends, according to the court reports, that they are going on a vacation. All along, his plan was to join ISIS, to fight alongside ISIS. And when he got there, he got his training. He was fighting alongside ISIS. Then they moved him to the construction ward. Then they moved him to some other different parts of ISIS. And he had buyer's remorse, as we often see when Western fighters go over to ISIS and try to be a part of that empire. And he tried to come back. And of course, now, we don't hear about ISIS as much as we used to, but we're hearing a lot about these cases when Western citizens are being tried in the United States. In this case, he's in Florida. And facing the consequences of their decisions.
Lisa, OPEC surprised some analysts by saying that more output cuts are coming in around 1.1 million barrels per day. Now, when combined with previous cuts and with an increase of a carbon tax here in Canada, the price of fuel is going to be going up and up yet again.
Yet again, and just in time for the summer months when families want to hop in the car and take their trips and their vacations. This is not good news for the West. This is, I mean, no matter how you spin it, no matter how many times they tell us we're not facing inflation, we're not facing all these different economic consequences to what's going on around the world, here you have it again. So yes, 1.16 barrels cut once again. This is a decision made by the OPEC states. Saudi Arabia obviously having the biggest portion of that cut, more than 500,000 barrels cut from them again. And again, a decision to say we control what goes on in terms of oil output. It's not going to be President Biden. It's not going to be Russia. It's not going to be Iran. It's going to be us. And really flexing their power to say, this is what we have over the world. But again, who are the victims of all of this? Canadian, American families, honest working middle class families who just want to go to the pump and not be, totally ripped off and not have to make that decision and to really rethink their decisions just because of the price of gas, whether or not to take that next family vacation.
Yeah, like you said, with summer just around the corner, this is going to hurt families quite a bit. Lisa, government officials in North Korea say they're looking at sending weapons and munitions to Russia in exchange for food. The food shortage is apparently becoming a real issue for the Asian nation, and Russia needs more military help in its war with Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you're looking around the world and you're seeing that all of these rogue states that have been isolated by the West are now finding each other and being able to help each other out. So, in the case of North Korea, we know that they've already sold weapons parts to Russia. Now there's going to be an exchange to get them food. Of course, if there's sanctions on North Korea, if they're not able to get it from anywhere else, well, there's always Russia. You have them trading with Iran's regime, you have them trading with China. They will find each other, and that's because their main goal is to evade the sanctions, to evade the isolation, and to try to move forward with each other. And this is exactly how they've done so. Look, we have in the West have to rethink the punitive measures against Russia. I'm not saying to not punish Russia, but I'm saying we have to think about punishments that will actually work in the short term to stop the war in Ukraine instead of fueling Ukraine, pouring all that money into Ukraine, and then having to pay for it again by watching Russia grow bigger and bigger and stronger by teaming up with our enemies. So we're kind of losing both sides here. We're putting all this money into Ukraine. They're not able to make anything out of this war. And on the other end, you're watching Russia become more and more aggressive towards the United States and the West. And obviously, finding other ways to gain power, to trade, to get its weapons, and to move forward. So it's almost coming out as a zero sum, and we're becoming more and more irrelevant on the world stage, watching our enemies join each other and really move on together.
2 women were attacked by a man for not wearing their hijabs in Iran. Lisa, the man apparently poured yogurt on the mother and daughter at a market near the city of Shandiz. Now, an arrest warrant for the man, along with the women, has been issued. And Iran's president emphasized once again that the hijab is mandatory under the law.
Yeah, I guess this man found it very triggering to watch a mother and daughter at the local corner supermarket trying to get some goods while they weren't covering their hair. And so they got into a verbal altercation, which turned into the man then taking a bucket of yogurt and dumping it on their heads. And this video apparently went viral, especially in Iran. Look, these videos give women more and more courage and more power and more ammunition to move forward and not wear their hijabs and try to go into public places. If you remember, we covered at the Foreign Desk a few months ago that banks announced that they wouldn't serve women who weren't wearing their hijabs, or they wouldn't be able to work there if they weren't wearing hijabs. So different sectors are trying to crack down on to join the government in trying to enforce mandatory headscarves for women. And here you have 2 brave mother-daughter duo just going to the market without their hijabs, but apparently a local citizen took matters into his own hands. And again, they said that his arrest warrant is out also for disturbing the peace, and them obviously for not wearing their hijabs. So a lot of these stories coming out of Iran, the people are still finding ways of showing their disenchantment in this case, a mother and daughter, really becoming, they become symbols of this movement when they become brave enough to go out in public without their headscarves. So we cover their stories to tell of their bravery.
Yeah. Definitely. A radio station run by women in Afghanistan's northeast region has been shut down for playing music during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, the Taliban allegedly shut the station down, which started about 10 years ago.
Yeah, Hal, remember when they promised us that this Taliban would be different from the Taliban of the 90s? Well, they're turning out to be much worse. This is horrific. I mean, think about all the people who worked at this radio station, whose lives depend on it, who are able to communicate with the masses through these different media platforms, and they get shut down because they're playing music in during this solemn month. Look, this is obviously a takeover of religious extremism, punishing people just like in Iran for not wearing their hijab, here for playing music during the month of Ramadan. But of course, that country going backwards, I mean, Afghanistan, since the US withdrawal, and going in a horrific direction where people are really being repressed in many ways, women not being able to go to school, women not being able to go to their doctor's appointments alone, having to have a male chaperone, in this case, playing music. I mean, media is obviously shut down, journalists are arrested and rounded up. So here's more of that. All they ask for is their basic freedoms.
Bringing things a little closer to home, what are your thoughts on the indictment charges against former U.S. President Donald Trump?
Oh, how much time do we have? Look, I've said this to many audiences, whether you're left, right, or center. Disrespecting rule of law in any country is not a good thing. This might be your guy, and you might be in front of Trump Towers in New York City, rooting this on because you're so happy that the politician you didn't like is going through this. But next time around, when the Republicans are in charge, they might do this again because it will become precedent. And that's exactly what's happening. I think there's been such a knee-jerk reaction in our country here to Donald Trump, not looking at the fact that he is our president, or former president in this case, but even while he was president, you would have, lawmakers on the other side defending China over our president, defending ISIS over our president, and defending Iran's regime over our president. This sets a precedent. It does. It sets a precedent, and our enemies are looking and they're rejoicing at the fact that we are so consumed by this one man and this one individual. And what ends up happening is that those who support him become even more zealous about the cause. And those who are maybe on the fence about him look at this and become more supportive of him because of the, again, knee-jerk reaction by the other side. So, let's treat everybody equally. Let's not, I mean, if you saw a lot of what was going on social media, Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying if he's innocent, he can go to court and prove his innocence. Well, that's not how it works in this country. You're innocent until proven guilty and not the other way around. And that's how he's being treated in this case, the other way around, guilty until proven innocent. So it's very unfortunate that this is what is being shown of our country. This is very unfortunate with all the crises that are going on around the world, and how you and I just talked about so many of them and their priority, and what it means to us here living in the West, in Canada and the United States. So to really distract people with this nonsense, with this circus of a case, it is not a good look, regardless of whether you support Donald Trump or not.
So how much of a hit do you think this will be for the Republican Party? I mean, the election's coming up next year.
Right. It depends on how they handle it. I mean, I said this in the last election, and I think it's relevant again. It's theirs to lose. And if they go after each other, then the Democrats can just sit back and claim another victory. But if the Republicans play this correctly, meaning if they go after the right issues, we're talking about families, we're talking about school curriculum, we're talking about health, we're talking about transparency, we're talking about going after the WHO and the CDC and going after schools that are being very, just aggressive towards parents, focusing on the economy first and foremost, focusing on gas prices, on egg prices, on milk prices, things that really pertain to average Americans, and then going hard on a lot of the national security issues that matter, our northern border, our southern border, the fact that China is a huge threat and will continue to be a huge threat. And really walking away from a lot of this nonsense. I think the average American, regardless of political party, is tired of the nonsense, is tired of the lies, regardless of whether it's in schools, it's about COVID, it's about the economy. We're just being lied to left, right, and center. And I think that a lot of people are tired of that. They just want a hardworking, good ethics, president to come into office and to take this country into the right direction. And I don't know who that president is. I don't know who that candidate might be, but I think all Americans would appreciate something like that going forward.
She's our foreign affairs expert and political reporter. She's also host of the Foreign Desk. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.